Twila had never been so scared in her life. She was lost on the prairie, with no food, water, or shelter. The sun had set long ago, and the only light came from the moon and stars. She hugged herself, trying to keep warm, but the wind was biting cold. She had been out here for hours, maybe even days. She had lost count. Twila was a young girl of 16, living in a small settlement on the prairie. Her family were farmers, and they had a small cabin on the outskirts of the settlement. One day, while out gathering berries, she had wandered too far from home and got lost. She had tried to retrace her steps, but the prairie all looked the same, and she had only ended up getting more lost. While she wandered, Twila started to hear strange noises. They were coming from all around her, and she couldn't tell what they were. It sounded like whispering, or maybe even laughter. She shuddered, feeling a chill run down her spine. Suddenly, she saw a light in the distance. It was flickering, like a candle flame. She couldn't believe her luck. Maybe it was someone from the settlement who had come out to look for her. She started to run towards the light, hoping to find help. Twila ventured closer. She saw that the light was coming from a small cabin. It looked old and abandoned, but there was smoke coming from the chimney. Twila hesitated for a moment, but the cold and the darkness were too much for her. She decided to take a chance and knock on the door. She rapped on the door with her knuckles. There was no answer. She tried again, harder this time. Still no answer. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The inside of the cabin was dimly lit by a single candle. The walls were bare, and there was no furniture, except for a rocking chair in the corner. Twila felt a sense of unease, but she tried to push it aside. She needed to warm up and rest. Twila walked further into the cabin. She saw something that made her heart skip a beat. There was a figure sitting in the rocking chair. It was an old woman, with wrinkled skin and gray hair. She was staring straight ahead, not moving at all. Twila felt a sense of dread wash over her. Was the woman dead?
Hello?
Twila called out tentatively.
Are you okay?
The woman didn't respond. Twila took a few steps closer, trying to get a better look at her. Suddenly, the woman's eyes snapped open. They were completely black, with no pupils or whites. Twila screamed and stumbled backwards, falling onto the floor. The woman cackled, a high-pitched, unnatural sound.
Welcome, child,
she said.
I've been waiting for you.
Twila scrambled to her feet and backed towards the door. She had to get out of here. She had to find her way back home. But the woman stood up, and Twila froze. She towered over her, her face twisted into a cruel smile.
You can't leave yet,
she said.
You have to play my game first.
Twila had no idea what the woman was talking about, but she knew she had to get away. She bolted towards the door, but the woman caught her by the arm, her grip like iron.
Let me go!
Twila screamed. The woman pulled her back, and Twila felt something cold and sharp press against her neck. Twila's heart raced as she felt the cold metal of the knife against her skin. She could feel the woman's breath on her neck, and her grip tightened. Twila knew she had to act fast. She twisted her body and kicked out with her foot, catching the woman in the stomach. The woman stumbled backwards, dropping the knife. Twila didn't hesitate. She ran towards the door and burst outside, gasping for air. But the night was still dark, and Twila was lost once again. She could hear the woman's cackling laughter behind her, and she knew she had to keep moving. She ran as fast as she could, stumbling over rocks and roots. As she ran, she started to see more lights in the distance. They were flickering and dancing, like fireflies. Twila had never seen anything like it before. She was drawn to them, almost hypnotized. She followed the lights, moving deeper into the prairie. Twila got closer, and she saw that the lights were coming from a group of people. They were dancing and singing, their faces painted with strange symbols. Twila hesitated, but something inside her told her to keep going. She stepped closer, and the people turned to look at her. They were all women, dressed in long flowing robes. Their eyes were dark, and they had an otherworldly look about them.
"Welcome, child.
One of them said, beckoning her closer.
Join us."
Twila felt a chill run down her spine. There was something off about these women. But she couldn't turn back now. She stepped closer, and the women started to dance around her. Their movements were wild and uncontrolled, like they were possessed. The women danced. Twila felt something inside her start to shift. It was like a fog had lifted from her mind, and she could see things more clearly. She saw the women's faces change, their eyes turn black. She saw the way they moved, like they were being controlled by something else. She tried to run, but the women were too fast. They caught her and dragged her to the ground. Twila screamed, but no one could hear her. She was alone, lost in the prairie. The women started to chant, their voices rising in a strange language. Twila couldn't understand what they were saying, but she knew it was something dark and evil. She felt a hand on her forehead, and a wave of coldness washed over her. She woke up hours later, alone and cold. She had no idea how long she had been unconscious, or where she was. She stumbled to her feet and looked around. She was in a clearing, surrounded by trees. She could see the moonlight filtering through the leaves. As she walked, she saw something in the distance. It was a small cottage, with smoke coming from the chimney. Twila hesitated for a moment, but she knew she had to take a chance. She walked towards the cottage, hoping to find help. As she got closer, she saw that the door was open. She pushed it open and stepped inside. The cottage was warm and cozy, with a fire burning in the hearth. Twila felt a sense of relief wash over her. She had found shelter, at least for now. But as she looked around, she saw something that made her blood run cold. There was a woman sitting in the corner, with her back to Twila. She had long black hair, and she was wearing a long white dress. Twila could feel a sense of unease radiating from her.
Hello?
Twila called out tentatively. The woman turned slowly to face Twila, revealing a face that was pale and gaunt. Her eyes were black, and her mouth was twisted into a grotesque smile. Twila felt a shiver run down her spine as she looked at her.
"Welcome, child,"
the woman said in a soft voice.
"I've been expecting you."
Twila took a step back, feeling the hairs on the back of her neck stand up.
Who are you?
She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The woman stood up and walked towards her, her eyes fixed on Twila's.
"I am Lilith,
she said, her voice barely above a whisper.
and you are mine now."
Twila tried to run, but Lilith was too fast. She grabbed Twila by the arm and dragged her towards the fire. Twila could feel the heat of the flames against her skin, and she struggled to break free. But Lilith was too strong. She pushed Twila towards the flames, and Twila felt a searing pain as her skin touched the fire. She screamed, but Lilith didn't stop.
"You belong to me now.
Lilith hissed, her eyes burning with an otherworldly light.
You will serve me for all eternity."
Twila felt herself slipping away, the pain and fear overwhelming her. But then she heard a voice, a familiar voice.
Twila, wake up.
It was her mother's voice. Twila opened her eyes and found herself back in her bed, in her own time. She was drenched in sweat, her heart racing.
It was just a dream.
Her mother said, stroking her hair.
You're safe now.
Twila looked up at her mother, feeling a sense of relief wash over her. It had all been a nightmare. But then she noticed something strange. Her mother's face was different. Her eyes were black, and her mouth was twisted into a grotesque smile. Twila screamed, and the nightmare began all over again.